A real crime. In a series of podcasts, I want you to travel down some lonely roads with me. These are the roads I traveled with families who never got to say goodbye to loved ones. These family members were fated to live the rest of their lives waiting and wondering. I will begin this series with unsolved murders, but I will also revisit cases that include arrests because aspects of the case are worth re examining. I wrote these stories when I worked as a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. Thanks for joining me today. With Thanksgiving at hand, I'm thinking back to what I learned about homelessness and thankfulness. Episode 42, Giving Thanks. Years ago, when I visited Washington, D.C., I was saddened by the number of people I saw sleeping on the streets. I will always remember seeing a woman who was sleeping across a set of stairs. I cannot imagine how uncomfortable that must have been. On one of those visits, I learned about the work of Michael Kerwin, who took homeless people from the streets of Washington and drove them to a farm in Summers County, West Virginia. With always wonderful Gazette photographers, we did several stories about Kerwin's attempts to address homelessness. He saw too many people living on the streets of our nation's capital and wanted to help. He told me he was living in an apartment at the time and he had only his own money to use. He cooked hot soup and brought a large pot down to where he saw homeless people gathered at night. He dished it out to them there. One night, he told me, a man broke the pot of hot soup over Kerwin's head. The homeless man told him, "You are bringing food to us like you would to an animal." Stepping back, you and I can see Kerwin as the good guy. Why was he harmed? Kerwin told me he realized the man was right, but as one person, what could he do? In time, with help from other people, he secured a farm in Summers County. After a homeless person arrived from the streets, Kerwin told me that person would sleep non-stop for several days at the farm. The homeless person's body needed time to shake off the effects of stress and sleeping on the pavement. Kerwin also told me he had no definite plans for what to do. Life at the farm evolved. The homeless did chores to keep the farm going. Some men were even able to move off the farm and make homes for themselves. Others had no patience for a quiet life and felt the pull back to the city. The people at the farm also created a cemetery. A few of those buried there would say their happiest days were at the farm. They had no family members who could afford to bury them anywhere else. On a winter's day, I can remember looking at the graveyard and the handmade signs that represented those buried there. Almost no sounds came to my ears. Was this the silence of the grave? I also remember Kerwin telling me that he drove from Washington to Summers County with a dead man in his car. The man died in Washington and there was no other place for him. Kerwin stretched the man out in his car and buried him later at the farm. Many of us think how blessed we are, and we want to extend those blessings to others. In my lifetime, I have seen our ideas of homelessness change dramatically. Growing up in Oak Hill, I knew the names of several virtually homeless men. All were alcoholics. I think most people in Oak Hill also knew them, and our collective attitude was, "You drink too much, so this is the life you have." No one abused them, and most people spoke to them as we passed on the street. I knew their names from my father. He knew each man and never passed judgment on them. My father was grieved the first time he saw homeless women and their children on national news. He could not believe this was happening in America, he would say. Now we see drugs devastate whole families. The addicts become homeless because they spend all their money on drugs. Many of them abandon their children. We find it easy to judge them. They turn to crime to feed their habits and put themselves on the path to early death. It is a real crime to lose a whole generation of young people to drugs. I also think it's a real crime that we have homeless veterans. We say we are proud of our veterans, so none of them should be homeless. In a recent Gazette article, I was glad to read that the numbers of homeless veterans are coming down thanks to programs from the Biden administration. But as one veterans advocate said, the numbers are always one too many. The causes of homelessness are many, and a big factor now is the rising cost of housing. I praise everyone who prepares a meal for the homeless on Thanksgiving, and I praise everyone at Man and Meal in Charleston. They prepare food daily. Pass the sweet potatoes to everyone who shares the Thanksgiving table with you. Give praise to all the cooks. Most of us will push away from the table with full stomachs and plans to take home leftover food. I certainly applaud and participate in that great ritual. But it would be a real crime if we forgot that not everyone is so fortunate. Thanks as always to listening, to Tommy Siner for his always great work, and to Brenda Pinnell for her amazing technical skills. Please join me next Wednesday for a new episode of A Real Crime with Susan Williams.